Okay, good morning, everyone. I suppose good afternoon at this point. Thank you so much for joining us today. I know we'll have a couple of students join throughout, but for now, I'll introduce myself. My name is Bryn Limon. I'm the Assistant Director of Alumni Engagement and Scholarships in our office in Goleta. I am also an alumna of our program, so I studied abroad at the University of Edinburgh in 2015 for a year. And then I actually graduated from UC Santa Barbara and moved back to Scotland to work in our office in Edinburgh for another year. And following my time there, I decided to move to Chile to learn Spanish. And so I lived there for a year. And now I've been back in Santa Barbara for 3 years working for our lovely program here, supporting students like you all. And I'm so excited to get to know all of those that are in attendance today, to learn about your goals and desires for your programs abroad. And I am so excited to introduce our speaker today. So this is our panelist, Maggie, who is a student at UC Santa Barbara. I'm going to let her introduce herself, tell you all a little bit about her experiences on UCEAP and where she is now.
Yeah, so hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Maggie. I use she, her pronouns. I am a 4th year Psych and Brain Sciences major at UC Santa Barbara. And I recently came back from studying at Yonsei University in South Korea this summer. So I see that somebody in the chat was also interested about my program. So I'm super excited to tell you a little bit more about my experience studying abroad.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So Maggie, I think we can get started with just a basic question of how did you pick your program? What excited you about the Yonsei program? What encouraged you to do summer? So how did you go about learning about study abroad and what sparked your interest in it?
Yeah, okay. So I love talking about like my decision process to study abroad because I feel like studying abroad is one of like those things that sounds like an easy decision, but it's actually really complicated and a very big decision to make. So I knew coming in as a first year that I wanted to study abroad during my college experience. And I also wanted to do it specifically over the summer because to me, an important value was spending as much time as I could at my home university, but also coloring in my summers, like with different experiences. So that kind of like helped narrow down the search. Another personal factor of mine is that my mother is a flight attendant. So I've been able to travel prior to studying abroad. And at one point, my mom was able to take me and my family to Japan. And I really liked Japan. So I was actually looking for programs in Japan initially. And just because you guys know, for like the past couple of years, Japan was actually closed. And being in my 3rd year last year, I knew that I didn't want to study abroad after like my 4th year. So I knew like the summer was like my time to like study abroad, and Japan wasn't an option. So I was considering either the Netherlands, Korea, or Spain. And the South Korea program really spoke to me just because it looked like a really fun experience. It was specifically an international summer school program. So it's not just like UCs going, it's people from like all over the world coming into like one program. And I was also looking at like factors of like cost and what is it? I was also like applying to like certain scholarships, like the Gilman Scholarship. And I saw that the Gilman Scholarship actually had like supplementary funds if you studied abroad in a country where the language was considered a critical need language like to learn. And Korean was one of them. So that definitely factored into like my decision to study abroad. And then there was another like factor that contributed me to like studying abroad in Korea that I can't think of right now, but those are like the big overarching reasons to why I studied abroad in Korea.
Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much for explaining that. That's wonderful. I think it's really interesting to hear each student's experience coming to their decision to study abroad and where they chose and for how long they chose, because we all have our own goals and motivations behind our programs. And I chose Scotland because I was excited about being in the UK. My parents had encouraged me to follow UK politics and literature, and I was a literature major, and I thought, oh, I'll go to London. And then I met an old Scottish man in a clothing store one day and talked to him for 40 minutes. And by the end of the conversation, he was pushing me towards Scotland. And I decided, okay, I'll go for a year. I'll just trust a stranger, trust this intervention of faith. And I'm so glad that I did. I'm really lucky that I spent a year abroad, and it's so nice to have a variety of programs available through UCEAP, and that students can go for a summer, for a semester, a quarter, or a whole year. So I'm so glad you got the chance to study with us. So I think the next question I'm going to ask you is, what is one thing you wish you knew before your program?
I think one thing that I wish I knew before my program is definitely Korean. Um, so I feel like this is something that like seems like a no-brainer, but I think you should always have a basic elementary understanding of the language of your host country, even if it's not required by UCEAP. Or if like English is like the dominant language spoken in the country, just because it really helps you feel like more immersed in the country if you're able to speak the native language, and you're also just like not struggling as much. I think like you get like a really better experience. So I really didn't have like a elementary understanding. I had a basic understanding of like Korean, like I was able to read it, but I was not able to speak it at all, and I felt really silly. So yeah.
Absolutely. Having some kind of foundation there would be important. And I think that's
Yeah.
part of the joy of traveling and studying abroad as well, too, is putting yourself in that discomfort and seeing
Mhm.
what that experience is like. Definitely when I moved to Chile, I didn't speak any Spanish. And that's
Mhm.
why I moved there, was to learn. And so I remember being in a train station, having no idea how to navigate transit or anything of where I needed to get to. And again, relying on the kindness of strangers, and a random
Mhm.
Chilean man helped me and organized the whole trip for me. It was wonderful. But you have these organic experiences as a result of putting yourself in uncomfortable situations and pushing your comfort zone, which is really great. I want to
Yeah.
take a moment to encourage our students who are in the audience today to put any questions they might have for Maggie in the chat. So if you have questions about something that you're excited about on study abroad, anything that's kind of coming to mind now, go ahead and place them into the chat there. I wanted to ask you about culture shock and what your experience of culture shock was like, both when you arrived in Korea and what it was like when you got home. So what were your first impressions of the country compared to what you were anticipating prior to visiting?
Okay. So I before I studied abroad, I was watching like a lot of YouTube videos about like just the culture about South Korea, and the videos that I was watching were like, oh, like it's a very conservative country. Um, and then when I actually got over there, it didn't really seem like that. It's definitely conservative, but not in the understanding that we have as Americans, I believe, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Um, I think my biggest like culture shock over there was just because obviously US is like an individualistic culture versus Korea is a collectivistic culture. And I think this one example is how the public transit system works. So we would take buses everywhere, and the bus would go like really fast. Like it wouldn't really stop for anyone. Like if you weren't like at the bus stop, like at the time, like it's gonna go. And if they do like wait for you and like pause so you can like get on if you're like running late, like the bus driver is going to be visibly angry at you. And like I didn't really understand that at the time because I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm just trying to get somewhere, like,
mm,
but it makes sense because you're not the only person that needs to get somewhere. Everybody on the bus needs to get somewhere too. And that bus driver was just trying to make sure that everyone gets to where they need to go. And I was like, oh, like in the US, like, buses are usually late, they're running behind. And that's because there's that still like, oh, like, let me wait for this person, like this one person to like get on, make sure that they're on like safely. Like the buses in Korea would just go even if I wasn't in my seat. And I feel like in the US, they usually wait until you're seated.
right.
So I feel like that's like one example. And then coming back to the US, I think I can't think of any bigger culture shock other than like I was trying to pay with like giving my credit card like with both hands to like the cashier, and like we don't do that in the US, so I felt a little silly and I did that like a couple of times before I was like, okay, I'm not in Korea anymore. But in Korea, you hand your money with both hands, like as a sign of respect. And then usually like they'll give it back to you like this to
Oh,
also like show respect to you like as a consumer. And that's not a thing in the US. So that was a culture shock returning.
that's very interesting. Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Well, we have our first question from a student now, which is coming from Claudia, who asks, how do you find courses that will fulfill your major? Because when I look at the website, they mainly seem like electives, and I want to study abroad for a semester, but I'm worried that will put me behind. So Maggie, I'm curious if you pursued major courses while you were abroad, or if you took it more as an elective term because it was the summer. How did it factor into your academic path?
So for me, I think I'm really lucky in that I'm kind of ahead in my academics here at UCSB. So I was fortunate enough to be able just to take elective courses at while I was studying abroad. In fact, I actually recommend that. I'm not sure if like I can kind of say that like as a UCAP panelist, but from my personal experience, when you're studying abroad, you're sort of experiencing a lot at once and there's a lot of pressure. And I feel like if you're taking elective courses, it's a lot easier to enjoy your time. But I can also see why taking major courses out there are super beneficial. Like I accidentally took a marketing class when I was studying abroad. And that was like really cool. Like if I was like a marketing major and I took marketing like in Korea and I was like interested in doing like international like marketing, that's like a really good opportunity. So I think it's about just finding a program that aligns with like your career needs if that's what you're looking for in a study abroad experience and seeing what kind of programs fit into that.
Definitely. I think that's really good advice. Claudia, I would second Maggie's feedback here, which is I would recommend talking to your advisor about which programs could fulfill those major requirements, because it could be that you're really interested in a particular course of study and that's the motivation behind you wanting to go abroad. You don't want to fall behind in your study here. You might find one university has a better course offering than another within a certain host country. So also, some of the classes that are online aren't necessarily reflective of the ones that will be available for you to sign up when you go. So I would talk to your advisor about finding the best fit for you. You could even talk to your major advisor on your home campus about that, and just look through the different course offerings, and they should be able to help you out with that. But there's definitely ways to find programs that won't put you behind academically. And so we'll move on to Anne's question now, which is, how is homesickness and staying in an unfamiliar area from home?
Yeah, homesickness. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty hard. I think I underestimated how homesick I would get, just because like, you know, I didn't really feel homesick when I first came to college. So I thought it would be the same like studying abroad, and that was not the case.
Mm.
It was definitely hard, but keeping into contact with my family, like in those time gaps where like the time difference wasn't too brutal for both of us, really helped. Just like I think my parents like checked in on me like I want to say almost every day that I was abroad. So that just like really helped. And just I recommend like when you study abroad, like taking like things from home that are like really precious to you, just so you feel like a connection like back at home. Like that's really like a good thing.
Definitely. What do you think distinguished the homesickness that you experienced abroad from not really feeling it when you went to college? Did you feel that because it was such a different culture, it made you feel more homesick? Maybe the time difference? What was the contributing factor, do you think?
So I'm originally from LA, so it's only like 2 hours from Santa Barbara. So I think I've never really felt like too homesick because I knew like I also had my car up here. Like I could always just go home when I start to feel homesick. And then I think when I went abroad, you know, it was like a different culture. It was a different time zone. And it was just the fact that I was like, oh my gosh, like my entire family is like across the globe right now. And if I text them, they're asleep. So I think like all of that kind of like set in like on my first day, like when I got off the plane.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely a real strike at independence, being entirely on your own for the first time. And homesickness is such an interesting experience because it typically comes in waves. You know, there's you get there and you have the initial excitement of your program, and maybe that first day or two are really hard, but then the excitement hits, and then maybe a holiday comes up or an anniversary comes up and it becomes hard, or something at home happens and it draws you back. And it really comes up and down. And something that I wasn't prepared for when I returned from my program was reverse homesickness, because I was abroad for a full year and I formed connections. I formed what felt like a family over there, and with people who I'm still deeply close with to this day, 7 years following my program. And I really miss them. So when I came back, I felt like I had lost a big part of my identity in coming home. And so trying to square who I was, who I am now, following my program was a really unique experience. So depending on the length of study, how well integrated you are into the country, there might be kind of waves of different types of homesickness. And I want to talk to you about, and we'll come back to Alina's question here, but kind of the role of social media on your experience abroad. Did you feel like you were comparing, did you feel that sense of the fear of missing out from, seeing friends at home or seeing other students on their programs, or how did you engage with social media while abroad?
Well, engaging with social media. Well, I think I definitely was like missing out on like stuff back here in the US. Like I missed my mom's birthday and it was really like hard, like seeing like the family like gatherings like on social media. And I also felt like there was a pressure because my program was only 6 weeks, so it was pretty short, and I definitely felt like a pressure like to be doing something every single day to maximize it.
Mhm.
So I would say like there was definitely like a pressure to make sure that I was making the most of my experience and posting it so everyone knew that I was like living my best life, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Definitely. Yeah, I think that's the exact point that I'd love to address with some of our students, is that um, sometimes it's challenging while you're abroad to be happy every day, to be engaged every day, especially on a short program where there's a lot of, there's a time crunch, and or even a longer program where there's not that. Sometimes it can be stressful to see other students experiencing this curated, perfect view of what study abroad is like, but there are days that are hard. Homesickness can be challenging, and I think it's really important to be grounded in your day-to-day experience and to be aware that you're having your own unique experience on UCEAP, and even if you are missing people at home, like you'll be back soon. So it's good to know. And Alina was actually asking a similar question, which was, how long was your program? So you said 6 weeks.
Mhm.
And the follow-up question is, did you feel like that was enough time? And did you learn any of the language?
Did I feel like it was enough time? I'm going to say it was enough time for me. um, I think I learned a lot about myself while studying abroad, and while being in Korea. I was really appreciating the time that I had there, but I think 6 weeks was a good amount of time for me to be away from my family and in that country. Did I learn I was taking a beginning Korean class while I was abroad, but I signed up for the wrong class and it was actually taught entirely in Korean. So I'm gonna be honest, I I was definitely learning something about the language. I'm not fluent, and I'm sure if you showed me something I could read it maybe, but there's no guarantee I'm gonna understand what I'm reading. So again, that was completely my fault for signing up for the wrong class.
It happens. It's okay. And that's part of, figuring out from there is, I made a mistake. I'll move forward and I'll try to fix it on my own.
Yeah.
We have another question about kind of the experience of living somewhere that you don't know the language. And the student is considering studying abroad in Paris, but has never taken French. So their concern is their ability to connect with students and locals. So French is definitely a language that I'm not familiar with either. And the cultural difference would probably be quite stark between Chile and France. But I would say there was a lot of fun in moving to a country where I didn't speak the language and going out of my way to make friends despite that. So trying my best to learn a few key phrases, to find people who were kind and understanding in my stumbling. And the great thing about going on UCEAP is you'll have other UC students that you'll be able to make friends with, and other international students that are studying abroad as well. So a lot of students will end up getting paired with international students from across Europe, and there's really great ways to join societies and clubs. So Maggie, did you join any kind of societies or clubs while you were abroad to make friends, or maybe a sports team or anything like that?
So within my program, we didn't really have like clubs that we could join, but UCEAP actually did have like these short like pairing programs. So they actually paired us with students that were going to be studying at our home universities during the year. And that was a really great opportunity to just like meet with like local Yonsei students and just talk to them. And like some of them are here now, and like I've met up with them, and like it's so cool to have like that cross-cultural thing. And that was something unique to UCAP, because the other students that were doing my program that weren't a part of UCAP were like super jealous of us. And I was like, yeah, you should be.
That's wonderful. Absolutely. Making friends in that way. It's really cool. There's a lot of students who are international. They maybe are reciprocity students that are going to consider coming to the US. And a lot of people are just interested about cultural exchange. So if they find out that you're an American from California, they're really curious to hear about your life experience, even if it's not necessarily in French. So that's the cool thing about being at a university. I think that many people are excited about just making friends and forming new community. And so many students make their friends through clubs and societies or athletic teams or things of that nature while they're abroad. But I think, as Maggie was saying, it's great to get a basic understanding of the language so that you feel prepared coming into it. Even if that just means doing some basic prep on Duolingo and reading a little bit online and getting those key phrases down so that you feel a little more comfortable going into your studies. I wanted to ask you about academic differences between your UC campus and the experience that you had while abroad. What do you think marked the primary academic differences there?
So with my specific program, the professors were actually from the US. So it was like international summer school. Everyone was international, so including the professors. So I think like academic wise, it felt like pretty similar to a class that I would have taken here at UC Santa Barbara.
Okay, great. Yeah, and it just depends on the program that you select. So some of them have wildly different academic structures than you would receive here in the US, and some of them have very similar programs that are even led through American professors. So it really depends on the experience that you're looking for from UCEAP. That will determine how you engage academically while abroad. And speaking of academics, I'm curious, you and I had a brief discussion about this before the meeting, but how you feel now post EAP about your academics or career goals moving forward. So going into your program, you kind of had a different path in mind for where you wanted to go career-wise. So if you could explain what that path was and how that's changed and where you're thinking now.
Yeah, so I think before studying abroad, I was really dedicated to being a like counselor or therapist. And then when I studied abroad, like I said, I accidentally took a marketing class. And by accidentally, I really mean that. I was like, I feel like marketing is like a pretty like cool thing that like is not offered at UCSB. And I was interested in just like taking it like for funsies. And I found out that I really liked products and like market research. So like I said earlier in the webinar, I'm a psychology major and I do psych research. And while I do really like research, I also really like product research. So because I studied abroad and took that marketing class, I found like a new field that I'm interested in called user experience research, which is kind of like a blend between like market and psych research. And I probably never would have came to like that conclusion to even like jump into that field without studying abroad. So I'm really good. Like it was very like unintentional, completely by accident, just me being silly. And yeah, so that's how it kind of like changed.
Amazing. Okay. And that actually leads me into my next question, which is, what do you think is the best skill or value or talent that you took away from your experience abroad? What do you think is the greatest thing that it lent you from your time?
I think 100% empathy. I think like
Mhm.
empathy is so important. You don't even realize that you're like gaining it while studying abroad, but just holding empathy for like your not yourself, but like just the other people that you're around, and just like understanding where people are coming from and trying to like meet them where they are. I
Mm.
think I had to do like group projects while I was like studying abroad, and there was like a brief like little like frustration because like it was a 6-week program and we were like doing like a whole project, and just like holding like empathy for my frustrated team member was something I was like, wow, like okay.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
That's a great skill. I think that's one of the wonderful things about studying abroad as well is putting yourself in novel situations, new experiences. Like some people use public transport for the first time. Some people might be their first time away from home. So your first time having a real language deficit in the country that you're in. And it definitely garners a lot of empathy for the experiences of people who are maybe just not as comfortable with their environment here in the US. And I don't know if you had any experiences of people making assumptions about people from the US or kind of like your background or anything like that, but that's always really interesting as well as you learn so much more about the global perspective of the country that
Yeah.
you're from.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. It sounds like adaptability is something you definitely like. I think that's a better word instead of empathy. Like, and in addition to empathy, adaptability. You become so adaptable and you realize you're so much more capable of a whole bunch of stuff you never knew that you were a part of once you studied abroad.
Definitely. Thank you. Excellent. Well, we only have a couple more minutes, so I thought I would end with asking if you could give one piece of advice to an incoming UCEAP student, what would that advice be?
One piece of advice. I think one piece of advice is to really understand that studying abroad is a very personal decision. And at the end of the day, it's for you, and what you put into your program is what you're going to get out of it at the end of the day. I mean, just studying abroad is the same as like just going to like a big university, such as like the UCs. You're only going to get what you put out in it. And the way that you interpret your experience abroad is ultimately up to you. So do your research, think really deeply about what you want, why you're studying abroad, what you want to gain from it. And then before you leave, kind of like make goals of like what you want to do in the country, like personal growth goals if you have any, and just like refer back to those either while you're abroad or before you go abroad, just because I feel like that is just super helpful in understanding like yourself as well as your experience.
Hmm, that's a wonderful idea. Absolutely. Have you had a chance since coming back to do some of that reflective work on the goals that you set prior to your program?
Yeah, I definitely did. I journaled a little bit like before I went abroad with like my goals, and then I journaled during, and then on my flight home, I was like reading through like my journal, my entire like study abroad experience. And I realized that like because my program was so short, in the moment I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm not like learning anything. I'm like wasting my time. What am I doing here? And then when I was on the plane, I was like reading through everything and I was like, oh my gosh, I was actually having the time of my life. Like I accomplished so much and I didn't even realize it. And just
Mm.
like sitting with that, I think really helped me like just understand myself better and how I've grown, because I feel like you don't really realize that you're growing until after the fact when you're like looking back.
Thank you for helping us end on such a beautiful note. It's so important to share with everyone the wonderful impact of your program. And I'm sure for years to come, you'll be looking back and seeing different ways in which it has left an impact. So I'm sure everyone will join me in thanking you so much for joining us, Maggie, and for sharing your experiences abroad with us. And we wish you the best of luck with your graduation in June. So thank you so much for coming along today. And everyone else who's participated today, I hope that you've enjoyed the Study Abroad Fair so far, and that you have had the chance to attend different sessions. I hope it's been informative, and all of our team and staff are here to help you and answer any further questions you have moving forward. But best of luck and thank you, Maggie.
Of course. Bye.
All right, have a good day, everyone.